This is the appointed time and we have a quorum. First of all, welcome to the meeting of the housing panel. I ask members to use the button in front of you if you would like to speak. Item number 1, information papers issued since last meeting. You will find a list of papers issued since the last meeting on the agenda. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. CB bracket 1 418/19-20 bracket 01 list of follow-up actions, and CB bracket 1418/19-20 bracket 02 list of outstanding items for discussion. The next regular meeting will take place on the 30th of March 2020 at 2:30 in the afternoon. The administration proposes the discussion of 3 items. First, measures to facilitate the mobility needs of elderly residents by the Hong Kong Housing Authority. 2, progress of the total maintenance scheme. And 3, accelerating the sale of unsold tenant purchase scheme flats. I now ask members, do you agree that these 3 items are to be included in the agenda of the next meeting? There are no objections. So on the 30th of March, in the regular meeting, we will discuss these 3 items. Thank you. I would like to remind members that this meeting is actually rescheduled from the last one. So the regular meeting in April may be changed. Let me remind you that the next meeting will take place on the 30th of March. Item 3, Head 711 project number B191GK, Community Hall General Patient Clinic and Maternal and Child Health Center at Ching Hong Road, Tsing Yi. You'll find the paper attached to the agenda. I welcome the administration for attending. Now I ask government officials to use a PowerPoint presentation. We have with us Chief Civil Engineer Public Works Program, Mr. Michael Hong and his team. I'm going to dispense with the introduction. Please refer to the attendance list for the names. I now ask the Housing Department to give us a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me apologize. The Deputy Director is indisposed. Is the Deputy Director, not the Assistant Director. She's indisposed, so she's working from home. But rest assured that we have a whole team here with us to answer your questions, save and except the Deputy Director, of course. We have submitted a paper for project number B191GK, Community Hall General Outpatient Clinic and Maternal and Child Health Center at Ching Hong Road, Tsing Yi. We propose to upgrade it to Cat A project. In relation to B191GK, as we said in the second paragraph, we propose to reprovision a community hall, including a multi-purpose hall with seating capacity of 450 persons. That is the area in pink. The existing Chengqing Community Estate Community Center will be demolished. In its place, there will be a general outpatient clinic, including consultation rooms, treatment rooms, assessment rooms, a pharmacy, and other ancillary facilities, designated in orange. There will be a reprovision of MCHC, that is a Mother and Child Health Center, including consultation rooms, interview rooms, treatment room, cervical screening room, breastfeeding room, and other ancillary facilities. There are also some other ancillary works, including road works, public lighting facilities, drainage, storage, water supply, site formation, and landscaping works. We propose to start the work of the community hall. Once the community hall is commissioned, there will be a seamless transition. Then we move on to demolish the Chengqing Estate Community Center to build 2 blocks of residential flats, and at that site there will be the reprovision of general outpatient clinic and a mother and child health center. I will give you more details in relation to the public works. You can see the perspective view of the community hall. Here is the perspective view of the general outpatient clinic as well as the mother and child health center. This work is to meet the needs of the community and the increasing population, as well as to re-provision the community hall as well as the MCHC. On the 3rd of October 2017, we have consulted in relation to the general outpatient unit, the MCHC, as well as the community hall, consulted the Housing Affairs Committee of the Kwai Tsing District Council. On the 19th of February 2019, we have also consulted the Planning and District Facilities Management Committee of the Kwai Tsing District Council. In principle, members supported our proposals. Our implementation plan, as I said, that we plan to, in the 4th quarter of 2020, start the construction of the community hall. It is expected to be completed in 2023. Once the community hall is commissioned, we will demolish the existing Chongqing Estate Community Center and construct the general outpatient unit and the MCHC. It will take a longer time. The works are to be expected to be completed in 2029. We will make funding application as a whole to ensure that when the community hall is commissioned, we can immediately start the demolition as well as the construction of the other clinics and health center. In relation to project estimate, in money of the day prices, it is estimated to cost $1 billion and $33.2 million. You will see the breakdown here. I'm not going to go into detail. In the PWSC discussion paper, you will find details. If necessary, we will fine-tune it, but it's more or less the same as this. Our way forward, we plan to get your support today, and we hope to apply for funding application within this legislative year so as to start our work. I ask members to support our proposal and to give us your views. Thank you.
Fine. So I would lay out the order of speech. So first is Dr. Cheng, and then Yong Hui Yan, Shu Ka Fai, Vincent Cheng, Kwok Wai Keung, and Alice Mek. So you can press the button to speak. I would like to remind members, if you have direct or indirect conflict of interest related to money, you should follow the House Rules 83A, and you also pay attention to Rule 84 regarding the voting of resolutions. That's the rules of procedure. So each would have 4 minutes, including questioning and answering. So first is Dr. Cheng. Thank you, Chair. It seems to be about the maternal and child clinic and community hall, but I want to say these works are very important to Tsing Yi residents because there's now only one maternal and child clinic. There's only one, and it's because of the selling of the place to links. There may be the need to move the maternal and child clinic. So this clinic is very important. This health center is very important to the Tsing Yi residents because it's got to be. They may have to go to Chunwan for that. And also there's need for housing. So first, I would like to ask you regarding the outpatient clinic as well as the health center. You're talking about 2029 as the completion date. So 10 years later. So if it is 10 years later, So the MCHC is now in the hands of links. So will that health center face formidably high rent? So you need to take 10 years for the relocation. So what about the tenancy agreement for the coming 10 years? Will they be forced to relocate again? So this is my top concern. Because in 2017, when the shopping mall is traded to links, there have already been complaints about the relocation of the MCHC that is being proposed, and the government didn't say much about the agreement. So is the agreement for the coming decade fixed? So in the coming 10 years, will you ensure the normal operation and provision of services by the MCHC and the immunity from high rent for the health center? And we see aging populations, including Ching Hong, Ching Fat estates in Tsing Yi. So the outpatient clinic, is that living up to the demands of the aging population? So I would like to see the considerations of the department and the government. So thank you, Chair and Dr. Cheng. We have heard your opinions. So regarding the MCHC, I would like to address your concerns. So I would like to invite Dr. Cheng to also address the tenancy agreement problems. Because we have been renting that place for a long time, and we are confident that we can sustain the operation until 2029 before its relocation into government premise. In this planning stage for the MCHC, we have already considered the changes in society nearby, in the community nearby. So I would like to invite Dr. Cheng. Thank you, Dr. Cheng. Please. Chair, members, the hospital authorities is concerned with the outpatient clinic. Maybe Dr. Fong can add more on MCHC. Thank you, Chair and members. Regarding the MCHC, in November last year, we have extended the tenancy agreement 3 years with the landowner till 2022, and another extension will be till 2025. So the property department, the government property agency, will be responsible for negotiation of the tenancy agreement with reference to the market rent. So the tenancy agreement can be guaranteed till 2025, basically. Chair, I would like to add one point. It's a very special arrangement because it's first in the hands of links and then later being resold. Because the GPA is concerned with market rents, and they cannot disclose to us the market rates. So when we're talking about 10 years going forward, I'm concerned with our negotiation with the landlord that the government may not have enough bargaining power, and we will be exploited by the landlord in the negotiation process. So I just want the government to take a more long-term view in considering the issues. I agree with your points, Dr. Cheng. I would like to defer to the government representatives for more consideration. So the next one is Ms. Yong Hoi Yen. If the relocation will create impact on the provision of services, though I'm in support of this plan, I'm also wondering, are there any alternative plans for the coming decade? I see this plan includes the GOPC and the MCHC, and it's basically facing the same issues as the Polling Road outpatient clinic. Like the Polling Road, OPC will be the designated clinic. So will that be a separate entrance for the MCHC? For example, you're talking about peaks of the coronavirus or the flus. You may combine the entrances for both the MCHC and the GOPC. So I think alternative measures are needed to not intervene the provision of services by the MCHC. Concerning the MCHC and GOPC, I have to defer to Dr. Fong and Dr. Ching to lay out our considerations in the progress. So now it's still an outpatient clinic only, so I would like to defer to Dr. Fong and then Dr. Ching to elaborate our arrangements. Dr. Fong, please. Thank you, Chair. Currently, in the Tsing Yi MCHC, it has a separate entrance. Then it does not have a separate entrance with the GOPC, but in the new plan there will be separate entrances in different floors. I'd like to ask about the basically the entrance. As you see in Ching Hong Road, there are benches outside the clinics for them to wait to be consulted. So we see the risk of outbreaks for the coronavirus. So will you consider separating the entrances of the clinic and the center? I know the plans have not been finalized, so I would like to include the consideration into your planning process. Maybe I add a little bit to that. In our designs, now the entrances are being shared, but in a new plan there will be 5 elevators, so they will be in separate floors. So there will be flexibility in our operation, so the issue can be expected to be solved. Another issue is ventilation. So will there be a separate independent ventilation system for the clinic and the center? A quick answer to that, yes. Separate ventilation systems. Peter Shield. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to the third page of the paper. There are 2 circles. Is the PowerPoint page 3. So there are 2 red areas circled. Can you see the 2 red areas? The upper area, there are some captions below. What are those words? What is being written there? Can you see that? Is it the blue words or the black words? There are 3 lines of words. Can you tell me what is there? You can say you can enlarge the words, but I cannot do so here. You are putting forward the documents, but you don't make it visible enough for me, and you're putting forward the documents. I don't know how we can engage in this meeting because of your thoughts. Apologies to that, because there may be printing issues. We may want to save papers, so there are deficiencies in our printing. Don't tell me you want to save paper and then you have to compromise the integrity of the words. I'd like to tell you, you have to first build the community hall in 2023, and then after it comes into fruition, you consider demolishing the MCHC, and then 2029 all the things will be completed. Is it your plan? Yes, we will first build the community hall, and then we demolish the MCHC, and then we build the clinic and the health center. Because there is necessary for that to be a community hall. So you have to sustain the operation before the new community hall is being built, right? Is that correct? So the final phase will be 2023 to 2029. We have already compressed the duration. Will you have to go back to the district council to ask for their opinions? We have already reached an agreement with the district council and we would not have to go back. I would be in support of this plan. I will not come out and oppose that, but I only want to tell you your efficiency is low. I live in the Bremen Hill. We don't have an escalator there, and it's already decades, but there's still none being done there. Can you try to streamline the whole process, especially those related to the welfare of citizens? Can you shorten the whole process?
Please take the matter up and talk to the director. Try to compress the timeline. You're going to have the funding anyway, so don't make us wait too long. This is a comment. I'm sure that is also close to the heart to a lot of Hong Kong people. Next, Mr. Vincent Chang. If I refer to past district council papers, the district councils expressed two concerns. First, the provision of parking spaces and the design of the community hall. For the first question, I'd like to ask if the administration would look into the increase of number of parking spaces because there is an acute shortage and illegal parking is quite serious. The second question is about the design of the community hall. Well, nowadays, community halls are usually multi-purpose. Can you build in more flexibility in its layout and partitioning so that different groups will be able to use the site? There are two questions. First is in relation to parking spaces. In general, of course, we will go along with the Hong Kong PSG. We have reached the maximum capacity allowed, and then we have also added 5 more parking spaces. So in relation to the residential portion, there are over 100 parking spaces. We think that is sufficient. You can also rest assured that in relation to the community hall, it will just be like the others you have seen. There is flexibility. It can be put to different uses. It can be turned into a badminton court, and the layout itself is also very flexible and versatile. I hope that you can increase the number of parking spaces as far as possible. Whoever the user and wherever the location, we find an acute shortage. So please also consider putting parking spaces at strategic locations as well. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung is not here. Next, Ms. Alice Mack. Please turn on her microphone. Just now, the member was talking about time is taken. Well, a few years ago for the Ching Hong estate at MCHC, I remember that there was a chance that they could not operate. It was until the very late stage that it was decided. Well, it was a mess, and the new owner said that they were going to renovate the site. As a result, at the beginning when the MCHC was operating, there was still a lot of renovation work. We've been asking for the MCHC to be reprovisioned, and we made a suggestion that perhaps it can be reprovisioned at Tsing Yi Clinic. Last year, the Tsing Yi Clinic was renovated. However, our suggestion was not taken on board. Well, I've been in this district for over 2 decades. We know about the problem that is taken too long. Well, Whatever the obstacle, it will cause a lot of difficulties for local residents to use it. If you've been to Tsing Yi, the Tsing Yi clinic, you know that it is very accessible and there is space. It's just been renovated. Why did you not consider incorporating some of the services in the Tsing Yi clinic? You have put all the eggs in the same basket, namely the Ching Hong clinic. Whether it is the GOPC or the MCHC, well, they will have to wait for the owner to decide whether they're allowed to operate, whether the rental will be put up, or whether there will be escalators. Why are you so stubborn that you don't consider putting that into the Tsing Yi clinic? There is this doctor under the HA responsible for GOPC, that's Dr. Tsing. And he's been saying that, well, there is a spare capacity in Ching Hong, so Tsing Yi clinic will not run evening services. But do they know that Ching Hong is very inconvenient? That's why people don't go there. And I'm sure if there is evening service, people will swarm to Tsing Yi clinic. I asked the project to be expedited. And if the MCHC is to be reprovisioned, please sort out the transportation problem. If the Ching Hong clinic is going to provide evening service, please do something about a transportation network. Well, even if there is repair of the escalator, the Ching Hong clinic will not be able to run. Why don't you consider using the Tsing Yi clinic so that you can divert some of the demand to the Tsing Yi clinic? I'll have to trouble Dr. Tsing to explain about the Tsing Yi clinic. This project will, once and for all, resolve all the problems. But what about transportation? Don't worry, we have conducted a TIA, a Transport Impact Assessment. We are confident that this project will not bring any adverse impact on the local community. Dr. Tsing, I'd like to use the opportunity to explain. The Tsing Yi clinic is not as big as Ching Hong. We have added some rooms after the renovation, hoping to achieve more flexibility. The expansion for rooms will not be able to accommodate the MCHC of the Department of Health because it is rather sizable. The expanded space is used as a current example for some reprovisioning of service from Tsing Yi, Ching Hong, because the shopping mall will undergo some kind of renovation. So the space will cater for long-term needs. We hope that after 2029, manpower and service capacity will increase. We hope that tenancy problems will be resolved after 2029. Of course, we hope that the tenancy agreement will be extended to 2029. As Dr. Fong said, the agreement has been renewed to 2025. The expanded space under Tsing Yi Clinic will be able to cater for short-term needs as a result of shopping mall renovation. We will see how and when we'll be able to increase service capacity. That means we'll have to wait for 9 years. Every year we will monitor service capacity and demand. After the short-term renovation, Well, I talk about a increased in space in Tsing Yi. It can be turned into rooms. We'll monitor population changes in Tsing Yi and service an increase in service demand. Will you provide evening service at the Tsing Yi clinic? We'll wait for the completion of renovation at Ching Hong. We will now focus on providing evening service in Ching Hong. At the moment, we won't be able to have two different locations. 3 other members would like to ask questions, namely Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, Mr. Andrew Wen, and Dr. Kokaki. I will draw the line after the 3 members because we don't have enough time. Mr. Andrew Wen, Deputy Chair. I have 3 questions. First, I see that the new design provides for a similar number of floors as the existing one. In the past 2 years, whether it's the policy address or budgets, they advocate the idea of single-site multi-purpose. So will you be able to increase service capacity? There are 3 types of services. Will you be able to provide 1 or 2 more so that you'll be able to shorten waiting time for other services, say, for example, residential services? Mr. Shukafai talk about slide 3. There is a planned podium above the PTI, which is quite sizable. The last question is about the project time. Why is it so long? What is not unbelievable, but it is rather unreasonable. It's a small plot. It wouldn't take as long as 3 years, and the land's already formed. I know that it would take time to demolish a nearby building, but let's look at some other information. Under Phase 2, 2023 to 29, it takes 6 years. You can tell me about which quarters they are. Well, I reckon it will take 6 years. But for the Housing Authority, it only takes them just 5 or 6 years to demolish and redevelop a housing estate. How come this project takes as long as 6 years? But you have to feel the pulse and the urgency of the public. Thank you for the question. Of course, we try to make optimum use of every site. This project include just these 3 items because we're here to ask for your support for the 3 items only. But well, there will be community hall, there will be center for the disabled and some recreation centers. It's just that we are not here to get funding for those services. That's why it's not included this time, but it will be provided at that same site. The superstructure of the bus terminal is a podium. There will be 2 blocks. Regarding the project period, will I defer to my colleague? As you know that we try to find different ways to expedite the project. But we need to first build the community hall so that we can move on to the other portion. If we get all funding approval, there will be seamless transition. For the project period, I will defer to Mr. Ho. Let me supplement. Well, the 2 sites are used under the single site multiple purpose. There will be a podium and residential blocks will be on top. I'd like to tell you more information about the landscaped podium. They are for residential use. The GOPA as well as the MCHC will be there, and above them will be residential units. The project period is not particularly long. We will only expedite the project. We will not delay it or prolong it. If you refer to the construction of the community hall, if we get funding approval from the Finance Committee, the foundation will be completed at the end of the year. We have about 20 months to build the podium. Once it's done, we will get a temporary occupation permit so that the community hall can be reprovisioned as soon as possible before we move on to building the block. By then, it will be completed. We only need to work on the internal decoration. And in 2023, we will start moving the community hall and ancillary facilities there. Phase 3 will be the GOPC as well as the MCHC, and in 2024 we'll be able to start the work. It's not a simple construction work. Once the frame is constructed, we'll have to work on particular equipment and installations because they are clinics. We try to compress the project period. It is a little bit more complicated, so it would take a bit more time, but we will not be laid back about it. Dr. Kokaki.
Chair, Tsing Yi has no GOPC and community rehabilitation center, so it's now in the Kwai Chung commercial center, and it's very not ideal. So why don't you build a community health center in a new location? Dr. Ching, please. Thank you, Dr. Kwok. The first one you mentioned is community health center and the elderly health center. For the elderly health center, I mean, invite Dr. Fong to answer. For every district, the community health center is built and planned by the government. In the earlier phase of this plan, we have considered the services of the GOPC. What is your initial plan? When is that? Is as earliest as before the GOPC is being planned. I want to make a point. The primary direction of the government has already been changed. The community health center, we're talking about a population of 200,000, but it's not being considered, and the elderly health center is not also included. These are also necessary facilities. I'm not trying to delay the plan, but we are talking about the welfare of the elderly and the general populations in the district. If you say the plan is earlier than the community health center, it precedes the community health center plan, then you come to me with an answer how to accommodate all these facilities. You should come back to me with this. We have already conducted public consultations, but primarily want to follow the flow of work. Are you out of your mind? You have delayed for many years, and you are blaming me for the delay. Please calm down, Dr. Kwok. When will you give me the inclusion of these two centers? 3 months? Half a year? The quicker you are, the faster you can get funding. In fact, we see the needs in the district. You're not seeing any oppositions, right? Have you heard the opinions of the HA? The plans have already been delayed, and we're in desperate need for the community health center and the elderly health center. Do you listen to that? Dr. Kwok, please let Mr. Hong speak first. I understand your concerns, Dr. Kwok. I understand there are competing demands, and regarding the MCHC and the GOPC, we also see the needs there. I'm not blocking your plan. I'm just saying you should add 2 more items in there. Because of the limit in the capacity of the current plan, we have already utilized all the capacity. Can you answer me? Where can you do the community health center and the elderly health center then? I've listened to your view and the members' views, so I would defer to the relevant departments and the DH for further considerations, because we have already used up the capacity. So I hope you understand our situation. These 2 items are necessary and are in urgent need. Chair, you hear me clearly. And they are basically lagged behind in their concepts. And the community health center, elderly health centers are not creations of me or by us. Is the government's plan. So there are 9 years still. You're seeing the plot ratio has to be increased by the urban planning department. And you come back to here without any changes or considerations of our views. That's not the way to do it. I think you have heard the views of Dr. Kwok. I also see Ms. Mac raising hands. So can Ms. Mac, I'll give you 3 minutes for questioning and answering. Chair, they have talked about the community health center. If we're talking about another 9 years, we have to wait for, that will be too long. So now we're talking about one in Kwai Chung and maybe branches in different districts, maybe one in Chongqing Estate, but I'm not sure. Dr. Chang, do you have any information for that? Or the officer? Do you have anything to add? Thank you, Chair. It's of course the Food and Health Bureau. So the primary location is in Kwai Hing. There are sub-centers, or you can say ancillary centers, in the Tsing Yi area as well. Although it's just a branch, not the primary center, but it can still provide services. I think there are huge demand for community health centers, so I hope the sub-center, so to speak, can be open, so we don't have to wait until 2029. Of course, if you can include in your current proposal, it would be great. But if you're talking about 9 years, we have to wait. I hope it can be shorter than that. I hope the district officer can make a note for sure of the opinions of the members today, because the views, I think, are constructive, and please follow up on that. So we finished the discussion of these items, and we have agreed to put it into the Public Works Committee for further discussion. So I would finish this item. The next one is the item number B472RO, the Water Feature Park and Landscape Walk at Diamond Hill. So I would welcome all the representatives from the government and the Department of the Housing Department. So I would first invite the government to use PowerPoint slides to make an introduction. So it's also the Mr. Michael Hong, and also from the Waterworks Department, and I would like to invite the representatives to come here. So I would defer to Mr. Hong for the introduction. So I would like to make the best use of the time as my colleagues are coming in. So we like to focus on the item number B4002 RO, the Water Feature Park and Landscape Walk at Diamond Hill. We like to apply for the upgrading of the Public Works Program to Category A. So these B472 RO item include the work for the Water Feature Park and the Landscape Walk. We are talking about 26 and 400 square meters. So you can look at the orange areas would be the public housing areas. So first, we would suggest for the Water Feature Park, there will be reinstatement of 3 historic buildings, including the Old Pillbox, which is a Grade 2 historic building, and also the former Royal Air Force hangar. That's a Grade 3 historic building, and the Stone House. So we would also propose the construction of water ponds and a water feature resembling natural stream courses and a covered multi-purpose area and a multi-purpose activity room. And also, because there's this water line there, we've proposed water filtration plants and relevant display items for educational purpose. And there will also be landscape areas with fitness areas, shelters, etc. And also ancillary facilities, including, for example, toilets, baby care room, etc. And in the landscape walk, there will be benches, shelters, also other kind of landscape areas, and also baby care room and other ancillary facilities. So this is our proposal, and you can look at the outlines for the proposal. And as I mentioned, in the 1.64 hectare in the Water Feature Park, for the pillbox, because of the Sha Tin central line, the impact of that, we've temporarily placed it there. But for the reinstatement of that, we like to put it into Water Feature Park so that it can be appreciated by the citizens. And also the Royal Air Force hangar, we have already relocated it. So we'd like to reinstate the hangar. I would like to follow the original design of the hangar. So we also fetched the components with historic value for display, for the enjoyment of the public. And also the Stone House is the famous pop star, movie star, Mr. Chiu Wang. Make sure it's in place for the public enjoyment. And in the landscape walk is about 1 kilometer. And is above the Diamond Hill station of the Sha Tin Central Line. So there are two, you can see the 2 ventilation outlet there, and we will bridge the entrance of Diamond Hill station. And in the south, there will be public housings, commercial area. So the location is convenient, and we would adopt a wide kind of design for the use and enjoyment there. So, including the landscape area, religious uses, etc. And in the current item, we would only offer a Water Feature Park and a landscape walk in response to the demands of the community. And also the increase in population following the development of public housing there. We've conducted numerous consultations in the Wong Tai Sin District Council, and starting from 2017 until 2019, and we have got the support from the District Council. For the implementation, we hope to get the funding approval from the Finance Committee, so it will be completed in phases. And in 2023 and 2024, it will be completed in phases. So the total cost would be around 606.59 million. So we will give you more details in the coming meetings. So there may be slight modifications. So we hope to get the endorsement from members today, and so we can apply for funding approval in the Finance Committee. We invite inputs from members here. Any additions from other departments? If not, I see two colleagues are waiting to speak.
Each will have 4 minutes. I, myself, and the Deputy Chair would like to ask questions. We would like to have more time for the next item. If you'd like to ask questions, please come to conference room 1. Let me remind members that in relation to the item under discussion, if there's any direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please, before you speak, disclose the nature of the interest under 83A of the ROP, and also pay attention to voting arrangements in relation to items with direct pecuniary interest under 84 of the ROP. I'd like to declare that I'm a member of the Housing Authority, and I'd like to ask questions from the HA. Well, we've been fighting for this water feature park. It's rather controversial, and in relation to the entire project, it's rather fragmented. You see that next to this, there is public housing estate starting from 2016, and they will be completed by phases in 2021. However, for the park, the soonest, if everything goes well, it will be open for public enjoyment in 2023. How come that every single time you will have to have residents moving in there first before there are any facilities available? Every single time. For Po Tat, for Sam Choi Estate and other New Territories development area, that is the same. I asked Mr. Hong, can you compress the project period so that open space can be commissioned as soon as possible? Can it be commissioned at the same time as population intake? If not, why not? Well, this park is next to Long Cheng Road. As you know that there is heavy traffic along Long Cheng Road. In your design, in your layout, because there is only scanty information in the paper, have you considered putting in any facilities to reduce noise pollution, air pollution from the heavy traffic there? I know that the government will ask government departments to take up the project. This time, I believe that it will be handed over to the LCSD. What about the interface? I think it happens to a lot of cases. You complete your construction, but the LCSD is yet to take over, so there is a gap. Every single time, the government will exhaust the plot ratio. I don't know whether it's the same for this site. Please explain. If it's exhausted, then can you tell me whether there will be benches with covers at these parks? In new development areas, it can't be done because frontline staff told me that there is no spare plot ratio because it's been exhausted. So I'd like to ask you, has the EPR been exhausted? If not, can you maybe put covers for those benches in the park? I'll first answer the last question. Yes, there are benches in the park. There will be arbors acting as a cover. Have you exhausted the plot ratio? It depends on the entire development area. Just tell me, yes or no, have you exhausted the the plot ratio. Well, for a park, they don't really use plot ratio. That's why I did not answer you directly. But that is what's going on in a lot of the estates. Are you going to give me an undertaking that it will not be affected? It will not be affected. Please put it on record. Ching Road traffic. We have conducted environmental impact assessment, so it's been taken into account and there will not be any problem whether it is for the park or for residential housing nearby. There won't be any adverse impact from Ching Road. We want to expedite every project and we do our best. I'm sure, Chairman, you're aware of this. Regarding this project, we would like to expedite it. We would look at whether we can compress the project period, and we'll also speed up the tender exercise. If we get funding on time, we will start construction as soon as possible. Interface or taking over, don't worry. We have different departments involved in the project. We are confident that once the construction is done, it will be taken over by the department. I'm not happy because you have not answered me directly whether noise barrier will be put in so that the park will be protected from traffic. You have not answered me. You said you would do your best to expedite the project, but you did not answer why it's so slow, because starting from 2016, the construction of residential blocks started, and by 2020 there will be population intake. How come that the park will only be completed in 2023? What's the reason for the delay? Well, I will have to talk to different stakeholders, and in 2017 and 2019 perhaps Ms. Chim will be able to give you more information. Thank you. It's a complicated site because next to it there is the train station of the Sha Tin Central line. But the site will only be handed over to us once it's completed. It's not the case that we could start the construction of the park back in 2016. We had to go through the procedure. The district council, as well as some members in the community, expressed an interest in the park. We spent time talking to them. As you can see, soon as we obtained comments, we took them on board and we made adjustments to our plan. We only obtained Cat B+ for this site in September last year. And we immediately started the funding application process. Once we have funding support, we will start the work. I'm not trying to make things difficult for you. I just want to say that I've been unhappy with progress. I don't want to get bogged down in a debate with you. Please give me timetable after the meeting. Please ensure that you will stick to the roadmap and the timetable, and if possible, expedite the entire project. Mr. Andrew Wan, don't worry, I will follow it up with for you. For those watching live cast, you'll know what's going on. This is Tai Ham Estate, the old Tai Ham Estate. Well, then you realized is been here for a very long time. It was back in 2000. I was a social worker. I went away to study and came back. It was a while back when land was resumed, and then we waited 20 years. Of course, now you say that there is public housing there. But if you look at the entire project, it sinks your heart. The government's been complaining about a shortage of land, and they can't build public housing as soon as possible. But it's simply because there has been a lot of hiccups. The general planning is not as bad. There is some kind of balance there. I see the plan you've submitted to us. You can just put trees around the periphery. You can tell us the density of trees, how tall the trees are. You can, on purpose, build more trees at certain locations to stop dust, noise from entering the park and the residential area. I don't understand why you can't answer technical questions. You should be more familiar with them. You answer us, you take into account our comments, and then you fine-tune the plan. There are some locations with trees sparsely planted. You need to give me more information. I understand that the former Royal Air Force hangar will be reprovisioned. What about the stone house? Will it be reprovisioned? I find it quite sad. Well, you yourself said that they have conservation value. Then how come you demolish them only to reprovision them? Can you still call it conservation? Of course, it's better than throwing the entire thing into a landfill. But since you have already made plans that it is going to be a park, do you need to demolish them? If that is the approach, then we won't have any more historical buildings left in the world. You demolish it, but you reprovision them. Why did you not, at the outset, protect them? Can you avoid this approach in the future? This will save you a lot of grief from the community. Mr. Hong. I'll talk about the environment first. There are two parts. First, residential portion. As you can see, as you understand, that they've been set back, so they meet all existing standards. The design of the park, I will defer to Ms. Chim to give you information about the intricate design of the park. But there was the construction need to demolish it. Of course, we would have kept them if we could. As I said, that there were other projects, say for example the Shatin Central Link, and that's why we had to demolish it and then to reprovision them. I'll now defer to Ms. Chim. You're right. In the perspective, you see that for the water feature park, it's along Pokong Village Road, and Longchang Road is on a slope, so there is grade. So there is difference in grade. You see, there is a landscape walk is along Longchang Road. There is the ingress, egress, or exit of a train station. There are also some plant rooms and some toilets. They are constructed along the road, and they serve as a kind of buffer. We also plant big trees to act as barriers against noise and dust. It's a long, narrow strip. So there are limitations, no matter how we set it back. We're not professionals, we're not experts, but we know from our communication with departments, we understand that the type of trees, the density of trees, and the configuration will provide the function of a noise barrier. Can you maybe deliberately think about this along this line? Well, I'm not going to teach you. You told us that it can be zigzag and you can use a certain configuration and it will enhance the function. You can give us more information. Yes, we'll give you more information afterwards. Well, it's close to 12 o'clock. There are no more members who have pressed the button to speak. Let me say that in relation to projects submitted to us, of course, we're concerned about that. I ask government officials to understand why members are concerned. I ask the administration to consider our views and give us a written reply. Even if you get support from the housing panel, questions will be asked in PWSC or Finance Committee because it's our duty to ask questions. So please note this and prepare information paper. I don't think members will oppose to our endorsement of this project to the PWSC. I'll ask the clerk to do it. Once again, I thank the administration for attending. Next item is review of income and asset limits for public rental housing for 2020-21. I know that members are very concerned about this. As far as I know, that there will be a discussion in the Subsidized Housing Committee under the Housing Authority. I ask members to speak your mind because this is for the benefit of the grassroots. We need our voices to be heard by the administration. Now I ask the administration to come in to join us. We have with us from the Transport and Housing Bureau, Mr. Donald Tong and his team. This item will end at 12:40. I now ask members, if you would like to express your views or ask questions, please come down to press the request to speak button. I now ask the administration to use our PowerPoint presentation to present that paper, and I'll see how many members would like to speak before I decide the time I'll allocate to each member. Who is to do the presentation? Ms. Lui. Well, one of the eligibility criteria is to meet the income and asset limit set by the Housing Authority, DHA. We will, in accordance with the established mechanism, adjust the income and asset limit by taking into account current economic situation. I will first introduce the mechanism for the review of income limits. We use household expenditure as a basis. We will add a 5% contingency. There are two parts under household expenditure: housing costs and non-housing costs. Please refer to the left-hand side. You will see the calculation of housing costs. In short, we will use unit rent for a private flat comparable to PRH and times it by average reference flat size. For private housing unit rent, we will make use of the latest rent survey by the Census and Statistics Department. For average reference flat, we will make use of the average flat size allocated by the HA in the past 3 years. Regarding non-housing costs, we will use the CNSD's latest household expenditure survey. We will use the basis of half of the lower income And then we will also times it by change in CPI excluding housing costs, or change in nominal wage index, that is the income factor, whichever is higher. In relation to change in nominal wage index, it was taken into account in 2013 with the introduction of the statutory minimum wage. This is to reflect changes in income in time. If we use a 4P household, 4-person household as an illustration, well, for the income limit for 4P household is 30,950. You can see the figures in blue that are the parameters. I'd like to point out that in relation to non-housing costs, in the past year, change in CPIA excluding housing costs shows an increase of 3.8%, which is higher than the change in nominal wage index, i.e. 3.4%. So we will use the higher figure, that is, change in CPIA excluding housing costs. In other words, a 3.8%. In this slide, you will see that under this review, for 1P to 4P households are proposed income limits. Compared to the existing one, that is the one set in 2019-20, there has been an increase of 5.4%. I will now move on to the asset limit mechanism. Under the established mechanism, the asset limits are adjusted with reference to the movements in CPIA. Under this review, in 2019, the fourth quarter, compared to the fourth quarter of 2018, there is an increase by 3.4%. So we have made adjustments to the asset limit as well. On this slide, you will see 1P to 4P households proposed asset limits. Compared to the existing limits, there is an increase of 3.4%. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Anything to add by our colleagues? If not, we'll start the question and answer session. 5 members have pressed the request to speak button, namely Alice Mack, Andrew Wan, Leung Chai Chang, myself, and Vincent Chang. I welcome other members in the building to come down to ask questions by pressing the button if they so wish. We will end this item at 12:40. For the first round, there will be 4 minutes. If we still have time left, there will be a second round. Ms. Alice Mack. Well, this adjustment is the result of the mechanism. Ms. Lloyd only talked about the mechanism, so there aren't many questions we can ask. As I've said many times, under this mechanism, for people, elementary workers on statutory minimum wage, they won't be able to apply for PRH. Say a couple, they have a statutory minimum wage, they work for 12-hour shift. The two of them will earn more than the income limit. We need to think about that. There is the mechanism, but I've said many times, is there any chance that that can be changed? Otherwise, well, you force them to work for one 12-hour shift, the other one 8-hour shift, so that they can make just enough to apply for PRH. You need to make adjustments to the mechanism. Given current economic situation, we expect that a lot of workers will either be unemployed or have their pay cut. That means there will be more people eligible for PRH. That means the waiting list will get longer. What measures does the Housing Authority have to deal with a growing waiting list? In different meetings, the same topic has been discussed. With the introduction of the statutory minimum wage, we have added a factor, that is, income factor, the changes in nominal wage index, to calculate the change. But this time, the change in CPIA is higher than the nominal wage index change. That's why we have adopted the change in CPIA. In the past 2 years, we have used change in nominal wage index because it was higher. Regarding statutory minimum wage, it depends on the actual number of hours worked in a household, so it's difficult for us to paint everyone with the same brush. In short, this mechanism is the most appropriate approach. Sorry, I don't have much time. You said that you would consider the number of hours worked in each household. We understand that. That means you're asking them not to work hard. Say, a couple working 12-hour shift, now one of them will have to work less. No matter where we draw the line, there will be some people who are left out. We think the current approach is the best. However, I have heard Ms. Mack in the Subsidized Housing Committee meeting tomorrow, we will reflect your view. As to whether there will be more people applying for PRH as a result of unemployment or pay cut, of course, there is always a possibility. New applicants will be at the end of the queue. The most important thing is for the government to consider how to increase land supply and to increase production of PRH. As we've said, that in the coming 5 years, there will be 100,000 units being churned out. That is not enough. But for the subsequent 5 years, there will be another 200,000. That means a total of 300,000. We still believe that that is inadequate. The most important thing is to find more land. In the short run, well, thanks to the funding approval from the Finance Committee, transitional housing will be of some help. Previously, the Chief Executive said that the Housing Department, as well as relevant government departments, would endeavor to provide a rental subsidy for those who are on the waiting list for more than 3 years. We hope to find ways sorry, it's not a rental subsidy, it's a cash subsidy. We try to help them. Mr. Andrew Wen, the questions asked are really valid because every single time there is an adjustment to the income asset limit as well as the statutory minimum wage, where we are in a very awkward position because we're members of the Housing Authority, we're also members of the statutory minimum wage commission. But this time round, we're more awkward than we were in the past because we were saying that statutory minimum wage is lagging behind. As Ms. Mack said, for a couple working hard, if they have minimum wage, they make 19,500, which makes them ineligible. Well, we fully understand the mechanism as the Deputy Secretary has explained. Well, you have added another parameter to try to get a balance. However, it doesn't work. That means there's a problem of the mechanism. So that's why I'd like to ask you, would you review it? Can you undertake that you will conduct a detailed review of the mechanism? You talk about the housing costs parameter. There is a 1 for 1 and 2p. For 3p and more, it's an overall or general figure. Is there a further breakdown? Can you give us the information, Mr. Tong? I would like to first reply to the first question of Mr. Wen. The Subsidized Housing Committee will consider members' views, and we will do it again this time. As a result of adjustment of wages, there will be about 100,000 more people applying. Of course, we will consider their asset limit as well. The most important thing is to help those who are in dire need. There is limited housing resources. When we raise the income limit, we can help a lot of people. But what's going on now is that in the coming 5 years, supply for PRH is indeed limited. Our view is to help those in most need. Those with a lower income, even if they are on a minimum wage, some may work for 8 hours, 9 hours. Of course, we really appreciate people who work harder and longer to get more. But for some other people, for various reasons, they may not be able to work too long. And we need to help those people more. We heard Mr. Wen's view. Tomorrow in the committee meeting, we will have a detailed discussion in this regard. About your second question, I would like to defer to Mrs. Cheung.
Members just ask about the square meters for 1 person to 4 person units. In 2002 and 3, we took averages, but in starting from 2002 and 3, we found out that the rent for 1 person unit is relatively high. So we compare the rent per square meter between 1 person and 2 person units, and for 3 person unit or both, we continue to adopt the averages. You just displayed a good attitude, Ms. Cheung. You mentioned you would make adjustments when needed. 2-person family or 1-person unit are relatively rare situations. Once they have 1 or 2 persons who are working, they may have already breached the limit. So if you can have adjustment to the lines, to limits, for 1 person, 2-person units, so to accommodate the cases of 2 persons working at the minimum wage. So if you can take into consideration that factor, for example, the minimum wage factor, then you can be flexible in accommodating the needs of the one-person and two-person units. So there are 6 remaining members waiting to speak. The time for us would be till 12:45, now extended by 15 minutes to 1 p.m. So after Leung Chi-chung has spoken, I will draw the line. Thank you, Chair. Regarding the income and asset limits according to the mechanism, we have no reasons to oppose that. But under the mechanism is the well-off tenant policy. I'm more concerned with the income limits for the well-off tenants policy. I don't know if the Permanent Secretary know about the peculiar situation. Now, you can see the aging residents in the public housing. Because the wealth of tenants policy has forced the younger generations to move out of the public housing units. So as the Permanent Secretary has said, we are regrettably say that reminiscence the government's stopping of the building of public housing units. Because of that pause in the building of public housing, you had to launch the measure of so-called well-off tenants. So you have basically broke down the families by the implementation of the well-off tenant policy. Because once the younger guys move out, they will apply for public housing units again. So that becomes a vicious cycle. You are talking about 100,000 of youngsters waiting to apply for public housing units. So why don't you be more accommodating in allowing the younger generations to live with their family in the public housing units? So this is a deficiency in the well-off tenant policy. Can you make a response to that? Secretary, please. Thank you, Chair. For the well-off tenant policy, the aim of the policy is as follows. Because of the decrease in public housing once, we see longer lines waiting for public housing. And because of the limited places of public housing, we have no other ways to do but to adopt such well-off tenant policy. The policy is based on the classification of income groups of the residents in public housing. So we want to facilitate the departure of some well-off tenants out of the public housing units. Secretary, your policy has created a peculiar situation. For example, you're talking about a family of 3, and when you add the incomes together, and their income is already over 100,000, but because of that, they have to be forced out of the housing unit, and they have no other choice but to leave the unit, departed from their family. You are staying blind, turning a blind eye to that problem. You're talking about an anomaly in that policy front. Please make a note of that opinion, Secretary. I know the Secretary should acknowledge a lot of low-income residents are lining up for public housing units, and they are miserable. So I cannot emphasize more on the importance of getting more lands. But we are not seeing a lot of progresses in land searching. Today you come to us with this paper, you're inviting opinions with us so that you can make more inputs in the subsidized housing committee of the housing authority. I hope the secretary can make. I appreciated the efforts you made earlier in the past few years about the improvement of the policy, but what is facing us is the predicament of low-income families. The limit is being easily breached, and they cannot, therefore, be included into the safety net, so to speak. So can I invite the colleagues to go back in administration to reconsider that policy? And also the reserve funds. There is a calculation method for that fund. Is there a way to enhance the calculation of the limit for the reserve funds? I know you're looking at the consumer price index, the CPI. You are taking the highest out of the three. We hope the indicators can be reviewed as well. We have to include the families that are in need. And we also are saying about the cash subsidies for those waiting for public housing. But I want you to know these are just short-term measures and then could not be sustained in the long run. We have been pressing for progresses in public housing completions. Can you please expedite Ms. Connie Yeung so as to enhance the efficiency in the whole process? Chair, first, including regarding the land supply, which will lead to increase in public housing supply, Development Bureau have been adopting different methods to increase the land supply, including the brownfield sites and the use of that. And we have a responsibility in the house as the housing authority to increase public housing supply. And we have been working with the planning department, with the development bureau. We have tried to compress the time needed for the plans from 3 years to hopefully 1 to 1.5 years. Of course, when we go to district council or LegCo, we hope to get the support from them. Another thing is about the construction work and the time needed. We're talking about 4 to 4.5 years needed. So far, the piling and other construction work needed are similar to private housing construction. But we would like to use the molecular housing, so all these measures can help to speed up the construction process. It's the modular housing, etc., the policies as such. So we want to introduce the reserve funds policy. That was supposed to be a buffer policy for buffering. That's about the contingency fund policy. And we have also introduced the nominal wage index in our calculation, so as to consider the impact of minimum wage on their setting of the limits. So the 5% we have considered is reasonable, but based on all the views we have gathered today, we will report those opinions back to the Subsidized Housing Committee. Mr. Cheng, Vincent Cheng, we have witnessed, Chair, a lot of changes in economic conditions. They're facing risk of unemployment. Maybe when they have less income, it's easier for them to apply for public housing. So we may be seeing a lot of families losing their eligibility for public housing because of the funds they get from their dismissal, including the severance pay or the long service payment. So you are also lagging behind in our public housing targets. So the CE has mentioned the policy in the 14th of January. So I would like to follow up on that because it's about subdivided units. It's been mentioned by the CE. So what's the progress on that? So talking about the limits on public housing.
Well, there is an increase by 3.4% in asset limit. I think that it would be able to address the issue mentioned by Mr. Chang. Regarding rent control, we are working at full steam, we hope. Well, we need funding. It will be allocated to us under the general account. We hope that after funding allocation, we will be able to complete our work in 1 year. The THB will directly deal with it. We're working on the composition as well as the scope of or the terms of reference. We'll be able to make some progress this year. Well, I was talking about subdivided flats, rent control. It's about the study of that, right? Yes. You're going to start the study this year or what? Has the group been formed? The THB is responsible for that working group. It has not been established yet. Preparation work is underway. As I said, that it involves a lot of studies, say on the law, on the economy, studies will be conducted by consultants, but they won't take too long because it's mainly a fact-finding research. They will also look at overseas experience. We think that these contracts for consultant studies will start in the latter half of the year. Will all these studies be completed before the end of the year? Not really. The studies and the drafting of the report will take another month. We have Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, Mr. Tony Tse, and Mr. Ray Chan. 4 minutes for each member. There is also Mr. Shiu Ka Chun. I will draw the line here. If members have anything else to say, please do so in written form, or you can arrange to meet with government officials. Next, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you. PRH income limit. Of course, there is an established mechanism. They will take into account objective figures, say the CPIA, the income factor, that is change in nominal wage index. It's a mechanical calculation. You can't really debate about it. But the result is that for a 2P household, a couple, under the new income limit is 19,430. The couple makes 20,000. They become ineligible. But for a couple making 20,000, what kind of lives do they have in Hong Kong? What kind of affordable living do they have? How much will it cost them? And if you think about it this way, you'll feel sad. A couple, husband and wife, 20,000. Are they going to? Should they be allowed to apply for PRH? But under the new income limit, they are ineligible. What can they get in the private sector? This is a huge problem in our society. I really appreciate that the permanent secretary has told us the truth. There is only so much they can do with the limited resources. I do understand. It is meaningless to argue where we set the limit. The most important thing is supply. But you need land to produce housing. We need to think about different ways to make land. Unfortunately, there are some viable ways, but there is no consensus, and we've been going round and round in circles in discussion. Reclamation is one of them. I've been a LegCo member for over 7 years. There are proposals to get funding for reclamation for residential purpose. There's only one site, 100 hectares in Tung Chung East. There's only one that is approved. So there is the cruel fact that no matter how much you raise the limit, you can't help everyone. Now, I don't know what the permanent secretary can say in reply. Well, whether it is reality or what I think, they are the same. It's not just the problem of the Bureau, is the problem for the whole government as well. We do our best to try to find land. We hope that we will be able to get approval, whether it is at the district level or in LegCo. If there is not enough raw material, we will not be able to produce anything. So we need land to produce housing. That is a reality. We're using a 2P household. The new income limit is 19,430. If you include MPF contribution is 20,453. It's on the low side to a lot of people. But if you refer to the figures from the Census and Statistics Department, it's actually higher than the median income of a 2P household. In Hong Kong, it stands at 17,800. We understand that if you're renting in the private sector, earning $20,000 doesn't make life easy. We hope that we'll get your support to make more land and to produce more housing. Declaration, I'm also a member of the Housing Authority. We have expressed our views in the Housing Authority meeting as well. Next, Mr. Tony Dare. Well, the government's done far from enough in housing supply. Housing is very important, but we haven't seen any improvement. The waiting list is getting longer and longer. They don't know how to deal with subdivided flat problems. On top of that, we have another problem. Flats in the private sector has completely detached from general affordability. I don't see what the government has done to help the situation. When we formulate housing policies, that includes public housing, subsidized housing, and private housing, it boils down to one thing. What is the goal of the government? The government expects what percentage a household should spend on housing. Well, there is a mechanism for public housing, but it's not everything. You can't just rely on public housing. There has been some changes. There has been different types of housing ladders. There are more subsidized housing. If you're ineligible for PRH, say if you work harder, even though you're on statutory minimum wage, you'll become ineligible. But what about subsidized housing? If you are ineligible for public housing and you have to go to a different housing ladder, does it mean you have to spend a lot more on housing? In a way, if they have to pay more, if they become ineligible, you penalize them for working hard because they have to pay much more on housing. You give them $2,000 more in income, they become ineligible for PRH, and then they have to spend more on housing as a result. Who do you expect will work hard? So you can't have tunnel vision when it comes to a housing problem. There is an established mechanism. We can give comments. You talk about the contingency. Can you increase the percentage? It's a valid point. Public projects will have a higher percentage point in contingency than this. If you don't set a percentage point that households should spend on housing, then you'll never be able to work out a solution. No matter what you do, it simply won't work. You talk about a lack of land because there is no policy. I hope the director and the permanent secretary will be able to do more. Don't just tackle the symptoms. Look at it comprehensively. I ask the director and the permanent secretary to note the members' view. Mr. Ray Chan. A lot of members have made similar comments. That is, for one person 12,800, 2P 19,430. So for a couple to both work, they become ineligible unless they have children. There is an assumption under this mechanism. A couple, the man works, the wife stays at home. Even if she works, it will be on a part-time basis or something that pays less, and that they can just meet the income limit. Last week, the HA lost a lawsuit. The HA refused an application from a same-sex couple in their application for PRH housing. They lost the case. That means in the future, same-sex couple will be able to apply for housing, public housing. In most cases, there won't be any children. I don't know whether the government will apply for judicial review. I hope you won't, because there's a very high chance that you're going to lose and you're going to just waste money. Because of this assumption, you set the income limit. If it's a working couple, more often than not, they will exceed the income limit. That's my comment. Now, my question. Well-off tenant policy. Currently, it's 5 times the income limit. They will have to move out. And if they've been staying there for 10 years, once every 2 years, they will have to report their situation. That if they make an honest report, they have exceeded the limit, then they have to vacate the flat within a certain period of time. The current problem is that there is unemployment. You may be making a very high salary, but there is no guarantee that you have the same job next week or next month. Will you provide some flexibility? Maybe there is a chance that there will be a pay cut or a lower salary. Would you maybe give them more leeway? Because once they've moved out, there is no going back.
Thank you. I know we are talking about the income limits today and the limit on their wealth. By virtue of that, we have take a view that public housing is the only way to alleviate the housing problem of citizens. But there are also many other ways, actually, to help citizens. Regarding what Mr. Chen has said, under the current framework, we have policies for those who fail to apply or to live up to the limits on income or assets. First, they can apply for the home ownership schemes via the white paper, the white form, and also for the first-time purchase scheme of housing. We will have in the coming weeks for invitation for tenders for lands. So the developers would have to build 1,000 flats, including in the Matao Kok area. We hope there can be multiple ways to help citizens. So what about the wealth of tenants policy? For that, there will be a notification period based on our inspections, or when we receive complaints, then we will carefully conduct investigations. And once we issue the notice upon the true evidence of such a breach, and if the so-called wealth of tenants, they have difficulties in moving out, for example, if they lose their jobs suddenly, they can have applied to the housing authority for provisional permit for living there. And on the strength of that permits, they can live for 12 months. So the principle is, if the tenants are much more well off than those who are lining up, then we would make them move out. And for the judicial review case, the judgment is just out, and our legal team are studying the judgments carefully. And today I cannot give you a definitive answer on whether or not we will appeal that decision. We will review all the grounds and also the decision before we make the final decision. So, Secretary, we have 8 members who have expressed their views regarding land supply and review mechanism, etc. And we have clearly reflected our opinions. I hope Secretary and your team can make a note of that clearly. So in the future, if you have the capacity, you should conduct review on the policies we mentioned. We see room for improvement, and I would like to thank the team for listening to our opinions, and I hope you can strive for the best in the future to better accommodate to the needs of the low-income groups. Mr. Shiu Ka-chun decided not to question. So thank you for your participation. We have no outstanding items. I'll call this meeting to a close. Please come to the meeting on the 30th of March for the regular meeting. Thank you.